What's going on, guys? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. This is pros and cons for the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. In this video, I'm going to be going over some of the best and worst things about this phone. So let's get into it. My first pro for this phone is the camera. This phone has a hole punch front-facing camera right up here, and this is actually a dual camera setup in the front-facing camera, which is really impressive. You don't see that every day. You can actually take wide-angle photos with this front-facing camera, so that's really impressive. Then on the back here, we have a triple camera setup with a 12 megapixel rear camera, a 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 16 megapixel ultra-wide camera. This is a really high quality camera setup that's able to take really good pictures too. In addition to that, this phone can also shoot video in 4K in both the rear and front cameras. So it's not only good for pictures, but also videos. So whether you're a more casual user of the camera, or if you like to shoot lots of really high quality photos and videos for various different purposes, the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus is gonna do the job either way. My next pro for this phone is the processor. The Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus gets 8 gigabytes of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone and it came back with a single core score of 730 and a multi-core score of 2,643. So this is some serious processing power here. Not only is this phone gonna have more processing power than any brand new phone you'll find in this price range, but it also competes even with flagship phones today. Whether you're just using your phone for basic things like web browsing and social media and want a better, faster experience, or you're doing stuff like high performance gaming, something like Fortnite that requires lots of processing power, or video editing with really big files, this phone's gonna give you a good experience with all of it. My next pro for this phone is the flagship features. Now you can get this phone for around $400. Now, if you are interested in seeing the exact prices, be sure to check the link in the description because that stuff is always changing. But as of the time this video is being recorded, this phone is typically in the upper $300 to $400 range. In around that price range, as far as brand new phones are concerned, you're gonna be getting a pretty mid-level phone. Not really bad, but at the same time, not nearly a flagship phone, so you're going to be missing out on lots of features like wireless charging, for example. And even though NFC is becoming more and more popular, it's for sure on this phone and it's not on every mid-level phone. In addition to that, the materials of this phone are really high quality. Again, something you're not going to find at the mid-level. This phone all around has really high quality materials, and you can just tell by looking at it that it's a high-end device. So if you are looking for a phone with those kind of features and that sort of feel, then the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus is definitely gonna provide some good value to you. My next pro for this phone is that it has a headphone jack. Right here at the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack. And the reason this is such a good pro is because with flagship phones nowadays, most of them don't have a headphone jack anymore. And while I understand why they're doing that, it is nice to have the option to use a normal pair of 3.5mm headphones if you want to. It is becoming more and more rare with these higher end phones as time goes on. My final pro for this phone is the storage. This phone has 128 gigabytes of internal storage with micro SD card expansion, so you're gonna get a lot of space for apps and videos and pretty much anything else you need. Even if you don't do a ton with your phone, apps in the system and pretty much everything is all getting larger and larger these days, so it's always good to have more storage than you think you need. And if you're more of a power user, you're probably gonna have lots of apps and lots of photos and videos and all that. And remember, you can put photos and videos on a micro SD card. So with this phone, you're really unlikely to ever run out of space no matter what you do. My first con for this phone is that it has a sort of dated look. Now, a lot of it is actually pretty nice. For example, the front looks really good and this camera looks super nice and modern. But then once you start to look at the sides, this silvery material, and then on the back, that's where it really gets bad. First of all, these fingerprints are just awful. You have to wipe this phone down every 5 seconds in order for it to be looking nice, and I just don't have time for that. Nobody really does. So it really is not a very appealing look. In the strip for the camera setup, I mean, what is this? This looks ancient in my opinion. It really doesn't look like a very new phone. Even though it's a high-end flagship phone, this phone feels like it's the age of the first Motorola Sidekick. It's just an archaic look as far as phones are concerned. I could definitely say brand new phones don't look like this. If you get a new phone in this price range, it might not be as high-end as far as the materials go, but it'll look a whole lot newer than this. My next con for this phone is that by today's standards, the display isn't exactly the biggest. Now, a 6.4-inch display was really big back in the day when it came out. I remember this phone and the iPhone XS Max were being talked about as some of the biggest phones we had seen in the time. But now we have phones with 6.8-inch displays and even bigger. Comparing this to the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, for example, is gonna make this phone just look tiny. So even though the phone does have a decent sized display, and I do like to say it is on the larger side when it comes to doing stuff like content consumption and all that, it's really not that big in comparison to what you can get even today. For example, the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2021 has a 6.8-inch display, so does the Samsung Galaxy A72 and lots of others, and those are all around the same price range where you can get this phone too. My next con for this phone is a pretty obvious one. This phone was released in 2019. Now, this isn't a huge con because it's still plenty useful. If you do want to see my analysis of whether or not this phone is actually worth it in 2021, definitely be sure to check out my video of whether or not this phone is still good in 2021 on the channel. But that being said, I can't not include this as a con because this phone is a little bit old and it's just getting older. As of right now, as you can see by this little edge panel here, it does have Android 11, so no worries there yet. But we know updates are eventually gonna stop, and it's really a question of when. Probably not for a little while at least, but they're eventually gonna stop, whereas if you get a brand new phone, it's gonna continue for a lot longer. And then of course the look of the phone, at least from the side and from the back, it's just not pretty. Whereas any brand new phone is gonna look a lot newer than this. I mean, I would hope it would since it's a brand new phone and this phone isn't, but you get the picture. My final con for this phone is the Bixby button. Let's just say I strongly dislike this button or anything like it. So I'm always gonna consider that a con whenever I find it on a phone. This is one of the most useless buttons I've ever seen on phones. It really should not be there, and I'm so glad that nowadays most manufacturers have come to their senses and done away with it because it's really just an annoyance. Even if you use the assistant, which I use it plenty, Google Assistant, Siri, Alexa, you name it. Those assistants are great, I really like them, but I don't like having a dedicated button for something that's supposed to be controlled by your voice. That in and of itself just seems silly to me, and there's so many different ways to activate it. I like to activate Google Assistant by just saying, "Okay, Google." I don't know why they need a dedicated button for it because all I've ever seen anyone do with it is accidentally activate it when they're not trying to, which is just annoying. So in my opinion, that button is a huge con in the design. But these were my pros and cons for the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.